So, welcome back to another episode of the BoomBastiCAST with the one and only Alexander Hawk and the other guy known as Matthew Fisher. And we got a great show for you today.
Yeah.
For those of you who are like myself and Star Trek fans, we have the great John Billingsley in the house.
Yes, sir.
Most people know him, of course, as Phlox from the Star Trek TV show Enterprise, which huge fan of him. But he's done so much more. What
Yes.
I love about him is he's a great character actor that can go from extremely comic characters, fun, lovable characters, to like sadistic serial killers, and I always love when you talk to people who are who jump from different types, and most of his career actually has been in TV shows. I mean, if there's a TV show that you've watched, I bet you in one episode you'd seen John,
Yeah.
because he's been in The Pretender, he's been in X Files, everywhere you look, he's that guy, and it's always fun to see what type of character he plays. Even if it's a small part, he owns the scene that he's in. I mean, he
24, Criminal Minds, Cold Case, The Others, Rarity, Classic, Rarity, The Others. I gotta check The Others out. I can't fib. I learned about it throughout the process, but I definitely want to check it out because it's got a whole bunch of stuff that I love, and you guys are gonna hear about that in a little bit. Cause I think y'all will love it too, and we'll all go on a quest. We'll all break into Steven Spielberg's fine establishment because I feel like it's in a safe in his studio somewhere. It's in a safe in the production company's vault over in Emblem there, or Emblem.
yeah,
You
but
know,
yeah, I mean, John Billingsley is a class act, and
big
I'm
guy.
so happy to have him on the show.
Very excited to have him. We're framing up his picture, and we are hanging that bad boy in the hallway of BoomBastiCAST in the archives. Here we go, everybody together. You put your fists right here, you move your fists up. You let go, everybody just put the great John Billingsley in the BoomBastiCAST archives, and now, for the first time, witness the fruits of your labor as you see him on the BoomBastiCAST. John, welcome to the show.
Well, for those people who are seeing this, let it be noted that both Matthew and I have rooms that are just jammed full of crap. And I was saying at the beginning that I'm reminded of the Collier Brothers, and I'm wondering if you know who the Collier Brothers are.
No.
Collier Brothers in the 1950s. Actually, there's a wonderful novel written by E.L. Doctorow about the Collier Brothers. Two old men, one of whom was a war veteran and was crippled, and who basically they lived in a gargantuan warehouse in New York City that was jammed floor to ceiling with newspapers and books and crap. The one who was crippled lived in the back corner in his wheelchair, and the other one would go out and forage, bring back the food and yada yada yada. So one night the guy goes out to forage, comes back, and he trips and he knocks over a pile of newspapers and is buried alive, and the guy in the wheelchair dies. Eventually they are found, and it's like the Collier Brothers as a metaphor for the dissolution of society. And I'm just going to say that, Matthew, you and I should play the Collier Brothers.
I support that fully. I'm invested now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a crazy story. The Coen brothers should make that movie.
It's a wild story, and for a long time back in the 50s, people kind of gave it a lot of metaphorical significance. I don't know why necessarily, but it's nonetheless, it's always a story that's kind of tickled me. I don't know why it got this horrible tragic ending, but nonetheless, yeah. What are you gonna do? Anyway, I digress. How did I get to be an actor? Mostly it was winning a series of beauty contests, year after year after year. And I was just kind of like tired of being kind of, looked at only as a piece of meat. And I thought, I've got talent, by God, I can perform. And so I started thespianizing. You don't believe that. Fifth grade. I had moved up. This is the true story, which people, I do so many
What is true
interviews that I feel sometimes like I should just start making other shit up because people have heard 90% of what I have to say.
Yeah.
For the 5% who haven't, I moved to Connecticut from the deep south, and I talk like this. And the northern children kind of tried to beat that out of me. So for a number of years, I was something of a pariah. But they had mandatory auditions for the school play in the 5th grade, which was A Christmas Carol. And being a big reader, I was the only person who could lift the words from the page with some semblance of emotive commitment. So I was cast as Scrooge, and for the period of rehearsal and performance, I went from being the class pariah to the class star, and I fell in love consequently for purely egotistical reasons
Right.
with acting. As soon as the play was over, I went back to being the class pariah, which is also, I think, an interesting lesson for an actor because, well, you got it, enjoy it, because it ain't gonna last, and when it's done, you're back in the ash heap again.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
really is that way. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I was looking at your IMDb, and I noticed the first film you were in was 7 Hours to Judgment,
Indeed.
1988, directed and starring Bo Bridges. And I was interested in, I mean, the movies on YouTube, and I watched it. I thought it was really well done, and I really loved your part. So, I mean, I was just curious how that came to be.
Well, one, I don't believe a word you just said because it's one of the worst movies ever made. And I was ridiculously miscast. I was cast as this tough pawn store owner, and I was all of 105 pounds sopping wet, and I looked like I just graduated from high school. I'm supposed to be chasing Bo Bridges around with a shotgun, saying, "Oh yeah, lemon shit. Oh yeah." It's so yeah, you're full of shit.
Hey,
Uh,
hey. Honestly, I think you were the best part in that scene. To be perfectly honest,
yeah, well, that's a pretty
um,
low bar. Yeah, Bo Bridges, I don't know why he cast me. I honestly, I think he must have taken pity on me. He just thought this poor kid, starving for his first break. What the hell? No one's going to see this movie anyway. Bo Bridges, wonderful actor,
yeah,
was wanting to begin a directing career, and as often is the case, what happens back in the day, this happens less now. Studios sign you to a deal, and you get X number of pictures, and you ask maybe to do something interesting, like, okay, I want to direct one. So they let you direct one, but it's something they give you $9 to do, and maybe a lesser script, which I believe was the case in this instance. However, yes, it's on my resume. It is not the worst movie I've done, which would be Shredder Orpheus for those
Oh
of
man, Shredder Orpheus is good times.
and for those of you who are interested in like really plumbing the depths of my oeuvre, I would say those two are the ultimate down beneath the carp and the skeletons and the moss. That's where you would find those two.
Yeah.
well, I mean, the thing is, being an actor. I mean, I myself have had plenty of films that fall down on my not favorite extremely low rung of what I've done. But one thing I've always learned is that no matter how bad a production is, or how you think you did in that, you always learn something. You always learn something. So
You
there's
learn,
always something you get out of, no matter how bad the project is. I mean,
yes, you learn what jobs not to take in the future. It's I indeed I did certainly. I have learned my lessons down the years in terms of no, I'm going to pass on that. No, I'm going to
Yeah.
pass on that. Yeah.
It's like a post-rockalyptic skateboard movie. I enjoyed it. I remember in the rental days, back in the day, catching it then. You know what I mean?
Oh, Lord have mercy on my soul and on my body.
But
Somebody just asked me to come to a retrospective of another movie that I was in many years ago that was equally putrid, and it was like a retrospective. Good heavens, that's like having a retrospective of this trash that was, like 3 weeks old, and we're gonna have a retrospective. It's like Gavoltnik with the retrospectives.
one man's trash is another man's treasure, as
Mayhaps. I like the fact we're starting with the worst of me. I like this. It's good.
well, see, if we're starting with the worst, that means we can only go up from here.
you only go up.
Indeed. You can only go up from 7
It
hours.
only go up, and that is a true I mean, if you stayed at the same level throughout your entire career, then there would be a problem. But
And that is true. Those were early days. I was primarily a stage actor. In fact, I had absolutely not an inkling that I would ever do film and television. It was the farthest thing from my mind. I got out of Bennington College. I'd actually gone to college to be a writer,
Yeah.
and realized that that was a preposterous notion. So I slid over to the acting division, where also all the girls were. So I got out of college thinking, oh, I'm going to be a stage actor. And I realized I can't sing or dance, so that's out. New York is out, and it's too fucking cold in Chicago. So Chicago was out, and I ended up in Seattle. And I thought, this is it. I'm a theater company, yada yada yada. So any film I did there was like, yeah, right. So yeah,
Yeah, that's why a lot of those older movies that they have those huge followings, and you always talk to people and they say, "Oh, I can't believe that was ever even seen." But it's like it's because I think a lot of the cast was like a lot of stage folks and people that really wanted to break in, giving their everything, and that's why you got good performances or at least believable performances, if you will, for the story being told. I
we're
mean,
not talking about either of these two films. So yes,
Orpheus is a wild story.
I
Everything about that movie is bananas. It's crazy,
have
but it's
not
fun
seen
in
it.
that way.
All right,
Yeah.
if you say so, that's all right. Clearly, you're
It's
both
like Forbidden Zone a little bit. If anybody out there likes Forbidden,
all
that
right.
realm.
Well, it's not if it makes you happy. I ain't gonna watch them again, but if it makes you happy,
Well, it's hard to get. So if you have a copy of it and you're not going to watch
it
it,
is.
I'll
Thank
take it.
God, it is. Thank God, hard to get. Let me say that. That is one of its best virtues. It's hard to find.
Yeah.
I God knows if it was on everybody's plate, I'd really be in trouble.
Big money. eBay, big
Yeah.
money.
Oh yeah. I don't get many residuals for Shredder Orpheus. In fact,
Oh, no.
in fact, you got to send me a nickel. I want a nickel from each of you bastards.
Fair enough.
well, I mean, okay. We talked about two of let's say the lesser known or lesser appreciated works of yours, but this talk
Or the stinkers, as some
the
might.
stinkers.
Yeah.
All right, but you can't tell me that Out of Time was a stinker.
No, Out of Time was good. I thought
Yeah.
Out of Time was good, and unfortunately, because the nature of the film industry is such as it is, it was not released at a good time. The fall these days is kind of the dead zone. After kids go to school, no more summer blockbusters before the Oscar movies. So they didn't really know what to do with this wonderful kind of B noir picture that was very stylishly made, but was still a summer escapist entertainment movie. So they kind of aired it in October. It disappeared at the box office, and it's too bad because I thought it was very beguiling and exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it's great because
Those who haven't seen it: Denzel Washington, Eva Mendes, Saina Lathan,
Dean Cain.
Dean Cain, and yours truly.
Yeah. I have to
Not
say,
necessarily in that order, mind you. Not how I would bill them. John Billingsley in Out of Time with and Denzel Washington.
but I mean, you do have to say that I think the scenes with you and Denzel, especially like at the end when you guys do that whole stick of like you gave me the wrong address and all of that, I thought that was by far one of the funniest and best scenes in that movie. It's great.
Carl is a wonderful, wonderful director and was very open. And it was a young writer who actually had written the script. So he as well was open to a fair amount of improvisation. You never know when you're going to get cast in a project, whether or not they're going to be sticklers for stick with the script, or they're going to give you some latitude. I love it when I get a little latitude because I can usually find a way to make sure I'm staying within the boundaries of the scene and still, kind of elbow some of the moments out. And he was game, and Denzel was game, and so for me, that was kind of a rare and wonderful experience. It doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Denzel, one of the best of his times. People would say, how is Denzel to work with as an actor as an actor and like that type of platform?
As an actor, he's amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
he's completely present in every moment. He's very playful. He's a great listener. He's obviously got the chops to go in any direction in any way. He's got the ferocity to suddenly scare the fuck out of you, and the tenderness, actually kind of lead you to believe you could be your best pal. As as a guy, I mean, the reality is that when you're working with the A's, you know,
Mm.
the stars, they've got a very, very they've got an enclave around them. And to a certain extent you understand why they do. So I didn't, and I can't say that I felt like I got to know him at all. I mean, that was not on.
Right,
So
right.
I can't speak to him except in a professional way.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
yeah, legendary, And you brought up Carl Franklin. I'm a fan of Carl Franklin.
yeah.
Went on to do a lot of TV stuff, which was cool. More recently, he did like some of the Dahmer miniseries, and he worked
Yeah,
on.
he works all the time. And unfortunately our paths have not really crossed professionally since
Yeah,
then. He did recently, I'm sure this isn't the last thing he did, but he was one of the executive producers on a show called Manhunt, which I was in, about the hunt for Lincoln's assassins, specifically Booth, of course, who takes it on the lam, rounding up the others who were in Washington and their eventual trial. Unfortunately, he really had hands on in the first three episodes, and I didn't appear until the fourth or fifth episode, so we just missed each other. Uh,
yeah,
but a wonderful man. I so loved working with him. And, you know, completely bizarre and random, this universe. The reason I got that part, in part, was because Denzel had veto rights on the casting.
hmm.
And for reasons I won't go into, basically said no, 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 no to every name actor until it was down to, well, I guess we'll just have to get a nobody. And that's what they got me.
Wow, it's a beautiful thing.
So yeah. So it was my anonymity that got me that part.
We often talk about how great that is. Whenever I see like when they did the secondary Pennywise movie recently, I thought they casting known comedians was like a weird vibe for it because you want to be able to kind of relate, take them out of not.
Yeah.
It's great casting in the sense of like now there's no longer another character in the audience's mind while you're doing your thing. You know what I mean?
It's a weird thing to be a character actor because there are these sort of, I mean, it's obviously extremely subjective, but there are different rungs on the ladder. And
Yeah,
y- 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 you're on some level always kind of thinking like, I'll know when I hit that next rung, when I'm either being offered more parts or I'm getting to audition for parts against a certain, you know, and I I feel like I've kind of been in between rungs for the last
yeah,
decade. And there's, unfortunately, there's not a whole hell of a lot you can do about it. At a certain point, as you age, your resume has precedes you, and people's
yeah.
perceptions are what they are. I think in part because I did a lot of genre stuff. I work, but that next level up that might have allowed me to kind of go a little bit farther, particularly in the film world, couldn't quite grab that brass ring. Not that, no
Yeah.
sour grapes. I've had a lovely life and a nice career, so I ain't
Oh
bitching.
yeah, for sure. I mean, many people don't even get to where you were at type deal. So like you can, it's always like that yin and yang. Like me
Yeah,
and Alex over here pursue film as well, and it's like you know what I mean. It's a beautiful
yeah,
thing.
yeah. No, it's a funky thing. It's like,
Yeah,
but as opposed to say a corporation where it's like everybody's got a title and the hierarchy is very clear. This
yeah,
ridiculous and eternal subjectivity of where you are as an artist
yeah.
in a world is always, it's always a little chin. Like, if I don't know if I hear, can I get to? No, I don't think that's quite how I'm being perceived. Oh well. Anyway,
As,
I digress.
as an actor, what motivates you more, like in the present time, entertaining the audience, or like knowing that with film and TV, it's kind of forever. So like you're always there. You know what I mean? Performing, entertaining.
I shifted out of stage work. I don't imagine I'm ever going to do a play again. I think the last play I did was 10 years or so ago. The appeal of stage work is, of course, one, the immediacy and getting a chance to get an immediate reaction from an audience, and two, the likelihood that you're going to play more interesting parts in more demanding and perhaps more um, literate texts. On the other hand, it doesn't pay nothing.
Yeah.
Double negative, and it is extremely difficult to do
Yeah.
good stage work. So many things have to come together. You got to get the right cast, the right director, an audience has to be interested in seeing it, the production values have to come into place, blah blah blah. After candidly 3 or 4 plays in a row that I was kind of marking the days off on the calendar. I think that's it for me. I think I'm just going to kind of become full-time film and TV actor. I like the
Yeah.
smallness of it. I like the intimacy of it. I like getting paid, and the hours are better.
Yeah, yeah.
Part of me always kind of feels like, I'm a for where I started and what my, like youthful ambitions were. I never would have imagined 40 years later that I would have abandoned that part of my of who I was. But life has changed.
It's like a weird legacy thing. I think, I don't know, because I think we've talked about this before on the show before, where it's like the theater is great and I love it, but like it's for the group that is there at the time, and like
It's
it's
very
not like it's there forever. You know what I mean? It's for that group that comes in and then show's over type deal.
I think in an idealized world, to the extent that an actor could kind of like, wave a magic wand, you'd
Yeah,
probably keep a foot in all camps.
yeah, yeah,
And I always thought I would. It's just the nature of stage work. Its demands are much greater on you.
yeah.
One, and as I get older, I mean, the reality is that the show comes down at 11:30, and you're wired.
Mm,
You've had to get to the place where you're at your peak at 8 o'clock. Your entire day is set up to be at your peak at 8 o'clock. And at 11:30, when you're done and you're wired, when you're younger, it's like, that's okay. I'm going to go out carousing with all my pals.
yeah.
When you're 63, it's like, I don't want to be fucking at my peak at 11:30. I you know, I, I very much admire older actors who have maintained a life in the theater and a film and TV career, because it is extraordinarily difficult to do, just physically, just um, spiritually, the nature of how you cobble that together. It's
It's a,
you
it's a
know,
juggling act for sure. You
yeah.
know, Alex over here is the actor of our group, and
Oh, okay.
I've often told him, I was like, "Hey, you ever think about like wanting to go do some theater? You know what I mean? Going because he used to back
Well,
in the day, and the
yeah,
scheduling's just so crazy for
yeah.
him."
The downside is, we both live in Boston, so we're not like in the hub of either New York or California. And the fact is that it's easier for. I'm since I'm in the position where I'm at, I'm willing to pay the flight, fly myself out there, just to get myself on the set, and do it for peanuts if I have to, just to get the experience and get out there. But unfortunately, not have the ability to move all the way out to California. Not at this point. Not unless I win the lottery. But
That was a chance of the lottery, Alex.
but yeah, the thing is that, as I'm guessing with also you, just I love the work. I love inhabiting a character and doing and trying to change and see what I can do to bring a character to life. I love telling stories, and that's why I do it. I honestly, it's I consider it like my drug. It's what just keeps me going, and I
Mm.
just love it so much that you know I travel to
Well, I'll be
California.
honest with you. I do not have the same relationship to acting that I did even 10 years ago, much less 20 or 30. I mean, one,
Yeah,
um, I'm 63,
yeah,
and life changes as you get older. It's no longer my mana. I like it. I enjoy it. I'm happy to work. I'm always will be happy to work. But I'm also absolutely fine if weeks and months go by. Yeah, I think it's really important, particularly as you get older, but always for an actor or an artist, to make sure that you don't become one of these cliches where it's like you want to put a bullet to your head because you don't have a job. That's just not, in my opinion, healthy. Which is where books come in. It's like, one, a wife who I love,
yeah,
and two, I love to read. So if the work is there, huzzah. If the work isn't there, it's like, that's fine. You know, it's fine. So much you can't control
yeah.
in this business.
It's the business. There's so many ups and downs. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's a visual business. It just, it's less so on stage. I think that's the other thing that, is something you give away. When you're a stage actor, you're going to play a wider variety of roles, and you're going to find people who are willing to take a chance on casting you against type. In film and television, the tendency is, I think, for most people to feel like your immediate visual impression is so critical in a filmic piece that they're not going to go against type with you, and consequently, the range of characters you can play emotionally, I can play a wide range of characters, but no one's ever going to cast me as um, the head of a detective bureau, or a lot of authority figures that I'm not, even though I'll read well for them, I know I'm not going to get cast because I don't project visually that image. That's the other thing that I find a little tricky about film and television. It's just the nature of it is, you hear this from women all the time, of course. The nature of it is that as you get older, the box gets tighter.
Yeah.
The competition falls away.
Yeah.
That,
True.
on the other hand, it's amazing sometimes you audition for something and then you see who got it. It's like, well, fuck, I was never going to get it. Look who got it. Look who I was competing against. Oi. No.
But yeah, I mean, going with what you say about doing different characters and all that. I mean, I remember watching you in Cold Case, that series where you played the serial killer George.
George.
Yeah, and I have to say, it's funny in the sense that up to that point, I've seen you in a lot of different roles. Of course, mainly more comedic, more fun, good natured, and then seeing you in is such a just a despicable serial killer character, and
You gotta
that
be.
blew me away. I mean, it was something that I wasn't expecting, and showed like so much, and I thought it was a great job. I really, I mean,
Oddly, I will say that if I had a breakout role in Los Angeles, it was playing a deranged child molester on NYPD Blue.
Oh yeah.
That was the first part that actually kind of opened doors for me. I'd moved up here in 95, and it was late 97, and I was kind of living on piss by then. It was like I'd spent the 20 grand I'd husbanded to make the move. And I was
yeah,
like, oh, what the fuck am I going to do?
Yeah.
I'd been into that office a couple of times, and no luck, even though I thought the auditions went well, and they brought me back. And that was just a couple scenes, but that despicable character kind of got me a run of work that, took me into my first series. So oddly enough, and thank you for your kind words, it was playing a villain that really launched my career.
yeah. I mean, I think, I mean, going with the whole, I mean, character actor, you know, thing, playing, like serial killers, villains, and all that, usually ends up being what gets a lot of character actors, a lot of steady gigs and keep them going. At least, I mean, we've had some people on
Yeah.
that, their entire careers are mainly playing villains.
Well, it's the nature of the product, I mean, there's you know what's on television. What's that statistic, this lunatic statistic that the average 10-year-old has witnessed 3,000 murders on television.
Yeah,
I mean, an actor's bread and butter is going to be, you're going to be the villain, you're going to be the victim, or you're going to be the red herring
Mm.
for half of your career. So yeah, for those people who drop handily into, like, scary villain, like, they just project scary either because
yeah,
of their size or because of, they've got their own niche. My villains were always somehow either kind of like pathetic, child molester, like they're kind of deranged,
Mm.
or it's like, he's the last guy I would have suspected. um
I mean that's a great ability to do, because definitely, I mean, when you're an actor and you're doing a lot of different and you're trying to stretch yourself, that it's always good to be able to be the last person that anyone suspected. Um, Also, I do have a question for you. The series The Nine, um,
yes.
that you were on. Now, I have to say, I was a big fan of that. and
That's what-
unfortunately, it died. Only did 13 episodes.
yeah.
I do have a question for you, and you're probably the first person I've gotten the chance to ask this. Is with when you have a character that's in the series that of course, you're hoping to go for multiple seasons. Do you plan out in your mind kind of like where you want the character to go, or where you see
You
it
have you have
go?
no idea. You have no idea. You have no control over it. I mean, unless you have a particularly intimate relationship with the creators and they're kind of telling you. For instance, they told Chi McBride. I don't know if
Yeah,
you watched the whole
yeah, yeah.
series. Just for the people who are listening, to give you a little bit of backstory, the show was about a bank robbery that went wrong. And the first half of each hour-long episode shows you in supposed real time what's happening in the bank robbery. So, first half hour, and it's like these robbers break in. And the next episode, the second half hour is like they're taking people hostage, yada, 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 yada. Chi
Mhm.
McBride plays the bank manager. The second half of each episode, we've flashed forward in time. We know some people survived and some people didn't. And we're seeing the characters that we got to know in the bank robbery now, kind of putting their lives back together. So the time schism was confusing to people. What was interesting is Chi McBride, it turns out, was in on it the whole time, the bank manager. So the creators of the show talked to Chai because they felt it was important for him to understand the whole arc of what was going on in the bank robbery. They didn't tell any the rest of us. Generally speaking, if you're a series regular, the writers themselves don't necessarily know. Breaking Bad being an exception, of course.
Yeah.
Vince Gilligan plotted the whole thing out. But on network television, one, you don't know whether you're going to get, a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, 10 years. So, and it's much more episodic by nature. It's not as serialized. So it's a constant surprise. I certainly, what I loved about that show is on any given script, it was like, I have no idea what they're going to have me do. I'm leaving my wife. I've got a girlfriend. Woohoo! And that's what I loved about that character too, is he's somebody who in that show was perceived, rightly or wrongly, as being the hero when the bank robbery is eventually, when the villains are captured. I've played a significant role in helping that to happen. And this nebbishy guy, who at the beginning of the show was suicidal, suddenly is lauded. And for an actor to get to play that whole range from sad sack to hero, and then as he's beginning to kind of strut, realizing that that hero role is actually not really real. He still has to live in the world. It broke my heart when that show was canceled.
Yeah.
I knew that was my best whack at the pinata. I was never going to get another whack like that.
Yeah, I really liked it. Yeah, it was one of the few shows that when it first came out, I saw the pilot episode and I was immediately hooked. And of
Un-
course, when
Unfortunately for us, it was
yeah,
on after Lost, and they really tried to market it as kind of a thriller. And it really wasn't. I mean, the first half hours, the bank robbery part was exciting, but it was really more about the nature of how you survive trauma and how you can radically remake your life uh, when necessity demands it. And people, the first episode, we had like 10 million people watch the first half hour. 8 million of them turned off in the
Yeah,
second half hour. It's like you come to work the next day, it's like, oh, we're not a hit, we're a flop. Uh,
yeah. That's
Terrible.
that's interesting. You said that about like the questionable marketing almost, because we do indie film and like we've been a part of films that have gone out and like we made a thriller that after it got picked up, the distribution company considered a horror movie, but it wasn't, and the horror audience like shitted on it for that reason. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And we've also been a part of a film that wasn't a horror; it was a comedy, but they gave it like a horror. They changed the name and made it look like a horror movie because they know that they just want the DVD bought. They don't care what people say after the fact. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's,
no, it is. I mean, like actors are also the mercy of editors, I mean,
yeah,
there's just so much that you have no
it's
no
it's
control over.
it's wild at a big network like that they even have like flub ups in their marketing. You know what I mean? A little bit
Oh,
like
all the time, all
yeah,
the time, and because they don't really know themselves,
yeah,
and they are trying to. And I understood it. It's like the biggest problem was there are only so many slots. I mean, streaming has changed so much of this, but
yeah,
pre-streaming, they're trying to put frequently a round peg into a square hole. The expectation of people who are watching Lost is that they want to watch that kind of show, and ABC doesn't have another Lost. So what's the closest thing they think they can get is us.
yeah.
And it's like, yeah.
That's yeah, streaming really has put a hurting on television. Must see TV. You used to have to tune in that night to watch it,
Yeah.
not see it.
Well, I
And
mean, in many ways it's the golden age of television. I mean, I don't
yeah,
know. It's like between, Hulu and Netflix and Amazon and et cetera, and HBO and Showtime and yada yada yada. I mean, there's no dearth of great stuff to watch on
right.
television. It's amazing. And people back in the day that you never would have thought would do television. Now it's like, well, Jesus, who doesn't do
It's the
television?
platform. Yeah,
Yeah. Unfortunately, on some level, what that's meant is that the nature of how money gets made there's, as we see, I mean, streaming services are beginning to realize they've kind of gotten out over their skis. They have to pull back on their product. Their model isn't actually ultimately sustainable, the subscription model. How do you introduce advertising now? People are going like, I don't want to watch a fucking ad. It's like, yeah, but if we don't start selling ads, we can't do it on subscription alone. Our residuals are, dramatically reduced, which for any working actor, that's bread and butter. I'm lucky that I got my years in during the network TV model because that's really where the money is.
right.
But as a viewer, I think this is an infinitely more interesting time to be watching television. I mean, network television, you were still trying to make it palatable for the lowest common denominator audience, or you wanted, the kid to watch it with the grandparents. So, with exceptions, it was always, it was watered down.
Yeah,
I mean, I find still, it's like, candidly, I shouldn't say this because I do CBS shows, but the nature of what the audience are trying to appeal to, it's like it's very cookie cutter.
yeah.
I mean,
Well, they got to play it really safe nowadays. Like
yeah.
the culture is really weird right now. Where you do the wrong thing, it's the end of the road for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see culturally how many things, many people have said. I think one of the things that our culture did was kind of open up the concept that, oh, I guess there are a lot of gay people. I guess I know a lot of gay people. Oh, I guess it's not such a horrible thing to be gay.
Right.
That is, I think, something that popular culture did. I do think what popular culture has not quite figured out a way to do is like for television to kind of really break the mold of how stories can be told to make them more interesting.
Yeah.
There's still a large percentage of the audience that kind of wants your traditional, you know, 5 act structure and wants to kind of watch the same thing
Yeah.
every night.
Yeah.
You know, thank God for streaming.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. They say YouTube's huge too. Like they did some type of poll and they were saying like YouTube's one of the most watched platforms, which even outside of these streamings, I know a lot of people. I got family members that just watch YouTube all day long. Crazy, 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 crazy.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I like to read more than anything else. So I'm very sparing on my consumption of media. But
Yeah.
on the other hand, I also feel like as opposed to when I was growing up, it's like what's on television tonight? Well, the Beverly Hillbillies is on, Ironside is on, and it's kind of like, more or less kind of pablum.
Yeah.
Now it's like, I mean, it's if anything, it's like that gag where you turn on Netflix, it's like an hour and a half later, it's like, I can't make up my mind.
Yeah.
It's pretty extraordinary.
Do you think that would ever be a problem? Too much options?
I find it daunting on when I watch television, like figuring out my wife and I will watch a series.
Yeah.
I commit to that series. It's like, well, what do you want? I don't know. How about well, yeah, but what about what the American's supposed to be good? Well, what about but I want 45 minutes will go by before we kind
Right.
of like, land on one.
Yeah. There's so much
No,
good.
it's pretty remarkable. I'm certainly very cognizant of these great things, and then that doesn't even encompass foreign television,
Mm.
which is the other thing that's a radical change. Is when I was growing up, it's like, yeah, right. I'm going to get a chance to see. You had Masterpiece Theater
Mm.
and BBC. and so you could, see some English shows. But nowadays it's like you can see the best of the best being made all around the world, which I think is remarkable.
Yeah. It's very cool to see, because each all over the place they have different vibes and different energies to films and stuff, and it's always cool to see, like, go watch a comedy from a different country, you know what I mean, or something like that, to kind of get the flavor of it.
Yeah,
I always,
like
it's good.
Call My Agent, I think, is an interesting one that has now been
Yeah.
adapted. The French show adapted for Britain and now being adapted for America. And
How it goes. Yeah.
I know it's going to be infinitely more coarse, I would imagine. I shouldn't say I know that, but I suspect it's going to be infinitely coarser than it was in France,
Yeah.
where I thought it was rather delicate. But it's very interesting to me to see how America puts its stamp on stuff from abroad. Back in the day, you didn't see like when All in the Family premiered in 71 or whatever it was. They said it was based on a show that originated in Britain. We never saw the original. To see now, it's like, oh, I can go back and I can watch the show from which this has derived and see what they've done.
I didn't know that. I love All in the Family. I think it's one of the best shows of all time.
Yeah, it was based on an English show, the name of which is escaping me, which now, of course, you can see, doubtless on YouTube.
Yeah.
Sure, that's how yeah, look it up. The English original for All in the Family.
They have their own Archie Bunker. Interesting.
Bunker. Yeah.
And I got a question about process for you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always curious when you got to dive into these dark roles, serial killers, child molester type deals. It's how much I know not research. I don't know real research goes into it, but like how much research do you kind of
Abduct a child, and
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Just to get the feel.
I go on a murder spree. No, I'm very Strasbergian that way. It's like,
Hey, I hear method acting is all the rage now. That's what
I know you like to read. You tap into serial killer books. Do you certain music you like to listen to or anything?
No, I don't. I'm very action oriented. I think for the most part, your job as an actor is to figure out what you're trying to achieve, beat to beat, and the nature of what it is you're doing and how your scene partner is responding to it creates behavior. The more you try and put a preconceived spin on it, this is how villains act, this is what I think the worse off you're going to be. So on that level, I don't, I don't bat an eyelash, because when you're playing a serial killer, it's like, look, I happen to get off on killing somebody. And I can know that, okay, my goal here is to see if I can get this young lady to get into the car so I can get her home, so I can kill her. You play the scene the same way you would play the scene as if you were trying to date her.
Yeah.
The action is what matters.
Yeah.
If you start playing the serial killer, I mean, Cold Case kind of asked you to play, and they wanted that. They wanted a level of theatricality to it, but you still have to justify it. So for me, in that instance, it's like, this is a guy who his entire life has never gotten a chance to showboat, and here's his chance to showboat that he's the smartest person in the room. He's never really had a chance to do that before. It doesn't mean that he plays a serial killer. He plays showboat, So in that sense, I don't think you ever play the villain. You just kind of figure out what the, what the driving action is, what the motivation is that is can be put in. I used to teach, and the hardest thing I think is always to say, don't play the result, don't play the emotion, don't play the behavior, don't predetermine what you want to look like, how you want to sound. What are you doing? What are you trying to achieve? What are you going after? What is your intention? What are you fighting for? And then to support it, why? Why do you do it? Maybe that's your question, is the why. Why do you like killing people? Yeah, you kind of got to imagine a lot of reasons, what it is that makes that important to you. But I find that that's an imaginative exercise. It's pretty easy for me to do. I can imagine my way into any imaginary circumstance. That's what Stanislavski famously said: behaving truthfully in imaginary circumstances. And to me, I always thought that some of what which I think is frankly where reading helps a lot. The more you read, the more you open yourself up to a vast vista of imaginative circumstances, and the more you realize that anything is possible if you use your imagination. The actors who are prepared to use their imaginations to imagine their way into an action and I find that to be not that difficult.
Yeah. I know you said writing was your first love, and you even went to school for some writing. Is there a lost novel out there within those books? An unnamed novel maybe floating
There,
around?
there were a couple of aborted novels. There's some
Yeah.
short fiction that will never see the light of day. Uh, I I uh, I had the good luck and the bad luck, the good fortune and the bad fortune of studying with Bernard Malamud, who I don't know if you're familiar with him. He is one of the 20th century's greatest writers. He wrote The Natural, the
Okay.
book
Okay.
which the movie trashed. The book is not the movie. He
Okay.
also wrote The Assistant, which won the National Book Award. The Fixer won the National Book Award. Blah blah blah. He was my teacher as a sophomore in college, and it was
Yeah.
like this intense class with only six of us, and we were supposed to submit our fiction. And Bernard Malamud, it's like taking an acting class with fucking Laurence Olivier when
Yeah.
you're 19 years old. And it was like, and he ripped me a new asshole as well he should, because I was 19 years old. I was like, oh, that's right. You know, he took no prisoners, and it was like, I'm not a writer, and I skedaddled to the acting department. Um, I've always been a reader.
Yeah.
It is my favorite thing to do. It is the one thing that will always. I couldn't imagine not being a reader, and so I realized Peter Mathiasen, another fabulous 20th century writer, who was also a teacher at Bennington, said the world needs more readers. We got plenty of writers, and I kind of took that to heart. It was like, okay, I'll be a reader. And it has been, and candidly, when I used to teach, it was like read, 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 read. Don't watch, because when you watch, you're watching something that is not as deep and not as demanding and not as intense as the book you are reading.
Mm.
Read to become smarter. Read to become deeper. Read to become more fully rounded. Read to exercise your imagination and bring it into your acting. I find that a lot of writers who write for these mediums tend to write on the basis of the other TV shows they've watched, the other movies they've watched, and they just kind of repeat the same cliches as
Mm.
opposed to, actually like what is this that is new, that is unique. I think great novelists and great short story writers are working in a whole other ballpark when it comes to the complexity and specificity of what they're going for.
That's a really good point. You know what I mean? If you're watching it, all you can really do is copycat. But if you're reading it, you can take it in and make it your own type deal. You can
Yeah,
like
and
collaborate.
not that writers don't copycat other writers. I
Right.
mean, the world is full of writers who are, but the nature of how you find, and I think that's one of the things that I realized early on, as a wannabe writer, is as voice, your unique and interesting voice. I was going to have a voice right away as an actor, and I was not going to find my voice as a writer for years and years and years. Later on, I started writing again, and I probably could write now, but I'm a little too old. I don't. You have to be extraordinarily disciplined, and I don't think I have that discipline anymore.
Yeah.
So, out of all of the books, what that you've read, what would you consider one of your favorites or genres of books that you like to read?
I'm not a great believer in genre. I think a well-written book is a well-written book, and so I read across all genres. I do read, I'll intersperse fun books. I'm not. I don't mean to sound quite as snobbish as I probably sound. I'm certainly happy to read an Agatha Christie novel or any number of things. But I kind of think you go back always, and there's this foundation of great literature that you have to keep returning to. It's like, you got to eat your vegetables.
Yeah.
I suck at eating my actual vegetables, but when I'm reading, I can eat my vegetables.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then
Literally.
I'll intersperse nonfiction. I am just a love it or hate it book. I think The Infinite Jest is a marvelous book. David Foster Wallace.
It's
I
funny you bring that up.
Yeah.
We were talking about that the last episode. So I know he had like a very and I was asking another guest. We had an author on, Brad Oates,
Huh?
and I'm like, I picked the book up. I remember when I listened to him on YouTube do like a speech at a graduation called "This Is Water," And it was like he got to this point where he's talking about like how you're at the grocery store, all these people are upsetting you, but like the reality is like put yourself in their shoes, and it was like powerful. So I started looking into him, and then I found out he had the horrible ending and stuff, and it was like Jesus, and I was like, I should look into this dude. And the next time I went to Savers, which is like this used bookstore over by us, and I seen the book and I grabbed it, and I haven't read it because it's huge. But it's a good read. I'll read it if you say it's a good read.
Well, no, see, it's a love it or hate it book. So I always,
Okay, all right, yeah.
Preface this. It's like, you know, some books that I fucking adore.
Yeah.
I'm not going to recommend to everybody because one, they are, you know, they are deep dives.
Yeah.
That book is a deep dive. That's like I'm taking a month out of my life, and this is my project.
Yeah.
You know, you cannot attenuate it. You cannot like lay, you know, I'll just read a few pages every day. You'll give up.
Yeah.
You gotta say, I am marrying this book. Like Proust.
For sure.
I love Proust, but it's like you cannot like just dip in. It's like he's, you know, somewhat similarly to David Foster Wallace, has a very unique voice, has a very unique brain, tells his story in an extremely round Robin Hood's barn way, and you got to go on that journey, which is what I love about reading. It's like I'm going to go on a journey with an amazing mind, and I ain't fighting you. I'm going on your journey.
Yeah.
Both of those writers are funny as shit, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But they're only funny as shit if you are prepared to go on the journey.
Yeah.
I have found that the people who like that book, you have to get through the first chapter is a little tricky. I think about 100 pages in, there's a wonderful monologue where the guy's waiting for his pot dealer to show up.
Yeah.
Having this neurotic, like, when is he coming? Why isn't he here? I'm going to, he's going to be here. Just calm down. Just calm down. No, he should be here. He should be here. It's like 10 pages long. And it's just like this incredible evocation of what it means to be like losing your shit, you know, because you are hooked on a drug. And it's fucking brilliant. If you get to that section and you love it, read on. If you get to that section, it's like I'm bored, give up.
All right. I remember I opened it up and I looked, it was like super small writing, and the book's like,
oh yeah, and then
I was like,
his whole shtick is he footnotes like everything, and the footnotes is like a whole separate fucking novel.
Yeah.
And they're brilliant. You have to read the footnotes. He's not for everybody. I freely confess. And like Nabokov, I love Vladimir Nabokov. He's not for everybody. The annotated Lolita, I think Lolita is the most beautiful, savage satire of American solipsism, and that you'll ever read. It's up there with, to me, David Foster Wallace in terms of what their targets are.
Yeah.
I like comic novels. They're very hard to do. I don't like them if they are childish, but I like a great mind trying to find a way to write a satire about things that, you know, need to be satirized.
Where would you place like a Charles Bukowski? Because I know the writing's good, but it's almost simpler, I feel. Would you put that? What do you think about that?
I'm not a huge Bukowski fan. I mean, you know, I think he had a small gift that he kind of turned into a shtick.
Yeah.
And you know, he was rewarded for his shtick. But I think if you read a little bit of Bukowski, you've read enough Bukowski and can't.
Yeah. Poor Charles.
You know. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's like it's some of those people who I think sort of have a persona.
Yeah.
Their authorial voice becomes, I mean, Hemingway is most often parodied because he's like, you know, it's the rough, tough He-Man, you know. And Hemingway's written many beautiful books, but when Hemingway kind of was parodying in himself in a weird way, or he began to kind of believe his own press, some of him is like, oh man, you need an editor.
Yeah. And Wallace only released like 3, like he did some short story books, but then he only did like 2 or 3 actual like novels. Or
well, he wrote some brilliant essays, and one of my favorites is a supposedly fun thing I'll never do again about his experience on a cruise ship. And he wrote a marvelous essay in which he I mean, his essays are, in fact, frequently, for those people who ask about David Foster Wallace, I say read the essays, because the essays are fucking great. He's got a brilliant voice. They're manageable. And then if you dig the essays, then go to Infinite Jest. His first book was called The Broom of the System, which is good, but it was his first book. It has great moments, not as fully finished, perhaps, as it would have been if he, you know, gone back to it. And then his last book was incomplete, although it's great, which is sort of
the Pale King or something like
Pale
that.
King, Pale King,
Yeah.
which I quite like. I mean, I've read all this stuff, and I love him. I just love
It
him.
was good.
I think he's brilliant. I mean, I just think he's a brilliant writer, and you know, I mean, yes, he hung himself because he was
Depressed. Yeah.
but he writes about addiction and depression. In fact, if anybody I ever talk to who is able to get to this part of the book in Infinite Jest, much of the book is about a gentleman, arguably there are two leads: a young man who's a student at a tennis academy, and a fellow who's going through Alcoholics Anonymous. That section about him in rehab it's hilarious, it's brilliant, and it's all the characters going through rehab. It is completely unsparing about the lunacy of rehab and completely appreciative of the need for it. And it's the best thing you'll ever read if you are trying to figure out why people who are depressed and addictive are stuck. Why they are stuck. I always wish, because I work with I mean, I don't work closely, but I've been involved for a number of years with an organization that helps people who are experiencing homelessness. And one of the things you bump into a lot is that, you know, it's people who, for various reasons, have become either addicted to drugs or because they've been living on the streets, have developed forms of PTSD. And the circularity of the behavior, the rat trap of it, you know, the maze of it, it's like you can't break the cycle. And I think David Foster Wallace is as good as any writer has ever written when it comes to that like how to get out of that. That's why The Infinite Jest is a video that is supposedly the most like wonderful, funny, marvelous video you've ever seen. So much so that when you watch it, it's all you want to do is watch it. So it's got like horrible, scary, addictive, you know, possibilities, and it's the MacGuffin in the book, and it's a stand-in for our addictive personalities.
I'm gonna have to check it out. Yeah, I read an essay he did on like a Cape Cod lobster weekend.
Oh yeah,
consider
a lobster. Yeah, that's one of his classic ones. Yeah,
he's a good writer. He is a good writer for sure. I'm gonna have to tap into that book.
But I you know, I mean, it's also like, it's like choose your favorite food. It's like if you're on a desert island, you don't want to eat any one food. So I could pick 100 fucking books that I adore for radically different reasons. You know.
And you like The Pale King? It didn't seem like he was unraveling or anything.
No. I mean, he would have, you know, if he'd lived, he would have revised it. He would have, but you know, I mean, the guy couldn't, as far as I'm concerned, the guy couldn't write a dull sentence.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah,
I like stylists, you know, like Henry James. I love Henry James. I mean, Henry James is very orotund. You don't read that kind of guy anymore. There aren't too many people writing in that kind of. John Banville maybe is one of the few, an Irish writer. But generally speaking, that kind of like Thomas Mann comes to mind. These guys who sort of like, you know, it almost reads bombastically, but the structure, the brain that can kind of conceive of, like, you know, Faulkner, you know, these gorgeous half-page sentences that somehow come together and carry this extraordinarily complicated set of thoughts. It's a marvelous gift. I love Faulkner. I think Faulkner's fucking amazing.
Yeah.
See, I could talk about this all fucking day. So you have to stop me because this is my favorite thing to talk about. I just read a wonderful mystery novel by a guy named Anthony Horowitz, who, you know, it was charming as shit.
Yeah.
Half of it is a novel by the novelist within the novel writing a pastiche of Agatha Christie, and the woman who's reading the novel, who's the editor, who's going to have to edit it, gets to the end, only the final chapter isn't there. What the fuck happened? And it turns out the novelist has died without finishing the book. Can that be? She has to investigate the novelist's death to find out what the fuck happened and why the book wasn't finished. It's great.
Wow.
Great.
Just when you think there's no way you can go new.
Great.
It's good to see still breaking barriers down.
Magpie Murders. Wonderful.
Yeah. You know, we're big fans of Mick Garris on the show. You worked on Fear Itself. You know what I mean? The community episode.
I worked on Fear Itself, but I worked on the others, and that's where I really got to know Mick.
Mick?
The Others was short-lived in 1999, and they did 13 episodes. It was a series about a bunch of intrepid Ghostbusters that was executive produced by Steven Spielberg.
Holy, that sounds great. I haven't seen that, and I want to see this now.
Well, check that out. It's hard to find. It was Steven got pretty pissed off because NBC put it on at 10 o'clock on Saturday nights.
Oh, geez.
This
Rough
was
time slot.
this was the last gasp of Saturday night primetime programming. And Steven was like, "Fuck you! I'm Steven Spielberg, and you're putting my show on the worst possible time slot. I'm done." He basically walked away.
Yeah.
Here we are on the air. Our executive producer and creative head honcho has kind of like said, "Screw you to the network." It's like, Mick Garris was executive producing, and they brought on Jimmy Wong and Glenn Morgan from X-Files.
Yeah.
And Glenn and Jimmy had a very different sense of what the show wanted to be than Mick, much less the people who wrote the original script. So it was a really weird 13 episodes. On any given episode was like, no, we're over here. We're scary. No, we're touching. No, we're funny. No, we're...
Yikes. Yeah.
Julianne Nicholson. I don't know if you know her as an actress.
Yeah.
That was her first role. Gabe Mocked, who was on Suits. That was his first TV role of note. Kevin J. O'Connor, John Aylward from ER. It was a good cast.
I gotta check this out.
It was, and it's the. I have to say this. It was also the biggest bummer of a last episode of any show you will ever see.
Really?
If you watch it, I won't spoil it, except to say it's like, well, that's a downbeat ending.
Is it like The Mist?
Yeah, again, I won't spoil it, but we knew we weren't coming back.
Yeah.
And Glenn and Jimmy wrote a last episode that was designed as a cliffhanger. So if for some miracle, we get picked up, they'd have written their way out of it.
Yeah.
Basically, they're saying, "Fuck you, NBC," and it's like, okay. I'll say no more. For those of you who want to try and find The Others, one, good luck.
I want to check it out.
All right, good luck. Good luck, The Others, yes. 1999, I think. And then 2 years later, that went off the air, and I got Star Trek. So that was kind of the beginning of my. You're the first time I've ever been interviewed that nobody's asked me a Star Trek question. I gotta say.
Well,
It's coming.
don't worry, it's coming. It's coming.
But,
I mean, but
I was on a little show you may have heard of called Star Trek.
Well, we wanted to, hit everything that we can, and of course we all know that that's probably the thing you get asked the most about. So that's why we keep it near the end to.
I appreciate. I'm just making fun of you at this point. Forget it.
It's okay.
I had to find my life. It keeps disappearing.
But I do have to say that I mean I myself have been a huge Star Trek fan since Next Generation. Watched all of them: Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, and the thing is, your character was, I would say, for me, the best character in Enterprise. You were the one that I kept on wanting to know more about because you always got me invested in every episode. I wanted to know what Phlox was doing, and that's why I kept on coming back every episode because
he was either napping or masturbating or eating. I can tell you. I'm giving the answer to the question right now. Either sleeping, eating, or masturbating. That's what he was doing.
Yes.
Or saving the universe with some kind of
or doing all three at the same time.
There it is.
Yeah.
But I have to.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm not letting you ask any questions. I just keep gabbing. Forgive me.
That's okay. The one episode I did want to talk about, which I think is called The Breach, where you as Phlox get a patient from another race another species that has a long history with your species, and the whole situation where he doesn't want you to cure him because of the hatred.
Yeah, and I say, fine, your choice.
but the speech you gave him about your character's sons and your youngest, and that I thought was one of the most moving things on television.
That's sweet of you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I
I
just
appreciate that.
I mean that's especially we all know everyone has their own different situations, but that kind of thing, unfortunately, is not uncommon. Where you have people growing up with animosity towards
Yeah.
another person because of religion, race, or skin color, and and you have those who are able and willing to fight against it, and then those that just go into it. And
Well,
I
that's certainly, yeah, and that's been, Star Trek's long history, going back to the original iteration of Star Trek from Roddenberry's, in 66 to 68. I mean, so much of what always animated him was, the absurdity of judgment based on something as silly as ethnicity or skin color, or, familial animosity that stretched back generations. I think that has been one of the the themes of the show. So yes, it was nice to have my little part to play in what I would consider to be kind of maybe the key theme of Star Trek down the years.
yeah.
I mean, it was always interesting to me, about Star Trek, and I'll plug a little bit of what one of the things that I do, which is to raise money for the Hollywood Food Coalition, which is the organization I help support, which again is designed to try and address issues of poverty and hunger in Los Angeles. We have something called Trek Talks every year, 2 years now. We'll do it again till it starts failing. We'll keep doing it. In January, we bring as many Star Trek guests as we can to do an all day long digital telethon to raise money for the Food Coalition. And one of the things that really appeals to me is the idea that the Star Trek community does consist of a lot of folks, fans, podcasters, actors, writers, etc., who fundamentally buy into this notion that letting go of some of these bigotries, and there's really no other word for it, is critical if we are going to ever achieve the universe that Roddenberry has imagined we could conceivably achieve. I mean, certainly you look at the United States and you think so much of what is driving this horrible dynamic right now is sheer flat out prejudice. Um, so anyway, a long-winded way of saying Trek Talks in January. Come and hear all sorts of great Star Trek personalities and give money to the Hollywood Food Coalition. But also, I love the idea of bringing the Star Trek family together that continue
Yeah.
to support good works, in all the different ways we can help build a better society. And that's what the show should be about. That's what our family, you know, is kind of should be about.
I agree with that. The Trek fans are one of the biggest groups
Yeah,
of people out there. You know what I mean? And they're,
yeah,
so some of them might have seen some hard times. You know what I mean? They're no
yeah.
strangers to hard times, so they get the vibe.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And no, and it's funny because I find sometimes, the Star Trek fans, when they begin to talk about, their different aesthetic, issues with shows, and blah, blah, blah. It's like part of me that always wants to say, well, let's just talk about the fundamental themes of Star Trek and how we as citizens in our society can kind of help support some of those underlying, actions that are required.
Yeah,
We're going to build that federation. What are you doing? What are you doing in your community?
yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean that's one of the
BoomBastiCAST.
best thing with Gene Roddenberry's vision of Star Trek is an ideal future where exploration, people getting together for a better universe, a better society, is such an important thing, which unfortunately I think is lost a lot, especially in today's society, where there's so much people still fighting about stupid shit, and realizing that if we all just work together on a common goal, that we can have that future if we all work together. But you'll always have, unfortunately, people that will always go against that because they want more stuff or more popularity, or just a feeling of superiority, which unfortunately is what keeps on keeping us from getting to that universe that
yes, I always like it into a tug of war. It's like there will always be people pulling on the side of the rope that is going to pull you into the mud, and then it's sort of our job to try and encourage people who might not be, pulling yet, to kind of get on the side of the rope that pulls towards virtue and pulls towards that perfectible universe. I think that's sort of what Star Trek, to me, kind of on a bigger level, the fact that it's been around since 1966 and all these iterations of Star Trek and this incredible fandom, to me, the potentiality of what Star Trek means as a metaphor for those people who love it to kind of get behind and push is about join in,
Mm,
join in. You want that universe? Join in. What are you doing? What are you doing? How do you make it happen? Because we need people on the rope, you know?
yeah.
Because you're right, there'll always be assholes. There'll always be Donald Trumps pulling on the fucking rope. Donald Trump, and his ilk, for them, it's like, hey, the more we divide people along racial lines and class lines, the more we raise animosities, the more likely I'm going to get to keep my taxes low, the more likely I am to continue to kind of hold on to the bigger portion of the pie that otherwise these virtuecrats will want to take from me. And
Yeah.
it's like once upon a time in America, we had what some people would call a confiscatory tax rate, and I understand that we might have needed to balance things out a little bit. But in the 1950s, people who made over $5 million, the amount over $5 million was taxed at up to 90%. And, okay, let's figure out a system that works more equitably, even for people who are extremely wealthy.
Yeah.
But when Reagan came into office, he basically eliminated, we had 9 different tax, levels, and he knocked it down to 3. And we right now, we simply do not raise enough money from people who have much to
Right.
help this society do better by those who have nothing. And that's a choice. That's a choice we make as a society, to live with 25% of America living in relative poverty, so the people who have millions can hold on to all of it.
That's crazy. It's like the people that would the small percentage that they would lose means nothing to them, but like what the person doesn't have anything, it's ruining their life. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
there's a book that just came out. The name of the writer is escaping me. His first book was called The Family, which is about this sort of a cadre of extremely right wing religious fundamentalists who have embroiled themselves into our country's politics so as to make sure that the country is run along right wing Christian lines. The second book is about the economic circumstances that attach to that, which is fundamentally about how do you keep the extremely rich from having to give anything back.
Mm,
And it's fascinating and deeply depressing, as somebody who's spent a lot of time working for not-for-profits over 40 years. I feel like every time I'm kind of trying to like figure out how to get more lunches to people or dinners to people, it's like I'm putting band-aids
yeah.
on problems that need to be dealt with on the federal level, and there are a bunch of assholes over there who are saying, I don't care if people are poor. In fact, I like people who are poor. I like low wage society. I like having more money come to me and less
Right.
money coming to them. I want it that way.
Yeah. It's great. Do you believe in like even above presidencies and stuff, like people call it shadow government, not to be conspiracy, but like you believe that there's a higher bracket of people that don't want
But
peace?
look at the Koch brothers. I mean,
Yeah.
Jane Mayer writes the New Yorker, wrote a absolutely scintillating book about the Kochs and what they have done over the arc of the last 40 or 50 years to intentionally make it extremely difficult for government to pass progressive legislation. I mean, I could go on and on in this vein because I'm a lefty. In my opinion, yes, I don't think it's a conspiracy so much as it is that the right wing has been infinitely better organized, and arguably it starts in 1964 when the Civil Rights Act passed. And Johnson said at the time, "Wow, we've just given the right wing and the Republican Party an incredible leg up politically, because all these Southern Democrats who wed for years and years, the progressive coalition was weird. It was Northeastern liberals and Southern Democrats. The Northeastern liberals said, okay, we'll electrify you, we'll give you water, we'll bring you into the modern age, and in return we'll look the other way while you oppress your blacks.
Yeah.
And that was the wedding. The Civil Rights Act broke that wedding, and all the Southern Democrats went over to the Republicans, and that's where we've been living ever since. And
Yeah.
every private interest group and business group said, "Oh, I see where my bread is buttered now." I get to join the Republican Party and really ride racism to wealth.
Mm.
And that's been the structure.
Yeah.
It's the scary news. You think we really start to think of the stuff going on behind the scenes, and not even behind the scenes sometimes.
It's not even behind the scenes. It's
Yeah.
right out here. It's just that 99% of America is too busy trying to fucking put bread on the table to pay any attention.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing that to me is at issue, is the right wing has basically said if we can intentionally, Ronald Reagan said this, he said, what are the scariest words in the English language? Knock, knock, knock. I'm here from the government. I'm here to help you. Oh, demonize demonize governance, and turn all the voters away. I don't have anything to do with this shit. And the only people who will be left to vote are the right wingers.
Yeah.
That's what they've been selling for years and years and years. Government is bad. Progressivism is bad. Give up. You aren't going to get helped. You know what you should do instead? Hate your neighbor. Your neighbor's coming after your shit. That's what you should do instead. That's been the mantra, and it's right out in the surface. It's not fucking hidden.
Right. Yeah. I'm with you. Well,
but we can't talk about it.
I know we're all going to disappear after this.
I mean, I rarely am invited back to a second podcast because I tend to not hold my tongue about this shit.
You are always welcome back on this podcast for sure.
This is definitely this is one of the things that we love on our podcast is that we let the guests go wherever they want to go because we believe in the freedom of speech, the freedom of opinions, whether we agree with them or not. That it should be out there. So to start with discussions, forced discussions, and that's what I think that our society needs more is instead of just burn your head in the sand to get out and talk about these things because these things aren't going away. So
yeah. It's just our political structure is such that unfortunately, like what the best conversation you can have is when, for instance, a U.S. House of Representatives race is competitive, so that you've got a bunch of people arguing because the person who's going to emerge and take that seat is gonna have to listen to everybody. So you want to talk about everything. But most of our House races are effectively uncontested. They're in safe districts. So there's no conversation necessary. Two right-wing candidates running in a primary are having a very narrow conversation. There's no worry about a left-wing candidate competing. And in some safe Democratic districts, the same is true. Two left-wing Democrats in a primary are having a very narrow conversation that doesn't include the right because it's a safe House seat. We've gerrymandered ourselves out of being able to talk to each other.
Yeah.
And the Supreme Court had a chance to weigh in, and they said, oh, la, 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 la. They could have made a significant, to me, decision that John Roberts failed to make was actually saying, yes, we have a role to play. We should not let states gerrymander themselves into not having democratic and competitive elections. And they punted like gutless cowards.
It's within their nature to act that way. I feel, unfortunately.
Well, it's within the conservative majority's nature. I mean, this is not the liberal minority. It was another 5-4 decision, as so many have been.
Yeah.
Anyway, we can talk about pleasanter things if you like. I do have a whole other tone I can use.
I know with Star Trek. I know that was it a Chris Black writer? Chris Black he got you with a little something, a little zinger on his way out. I think I heard the story.
Now, this is the story I tell, and I don't know if it's true or not. But in the second season, I believe, at a party, I was making fun of the fact that everybody on the Enterprise ran around in their underpants. It's like, when do I get to run around in my underpants? And Chris said, "Well, what if we had you run around without your underpants?" And I said, "Bring it on, motherfucker." Chris Black left the show, and the people who eventually wrote the episode in which I was running around without my underpants in season 3, I don't know if they were actually influenced by Chris or not. Could have just been coincidence. But I like to think that Chris put a little memo on the table when he left, saying, "By the way, make sure you get Billingsley naked at some point in season."
When you did do Community real quick though, the Community segment affair itself, You got to work with Mary Herron, I believe, right?
Yes,
Director of like American Psycho.
and
I
also a
shot.
director of the. She directed an episode of A Nine, so I worked with her.
Yes, I shot Andy Warhol, I believe she did, and the
Yep.
Notorious Life of Betty Page.
Yeah.
Clicks.
And she was not. She was not. I loved Mary. She was
Yeah,
not as well suited to directing television.
yeah,
I mean, a film is your baby. It's your vision. It's your voice. How many pages you want it, particularly independent films, like how many pages I'm going to shoot today, yada yada yada. Television is it's not so much as an intensely collaborative process as it's not ultimately the director's baby.
yeah,
It's the
true.
showrunner's baby. And here's you got to shoot 8 pages today. And I don't think Mary's temperament was incredibly well suited
Right.
to kind of like I like Mary a lot. I got along very well with Mary, but I think Mary was frustrated at not to I'm just speculating, but the
I mean,
sense I had.
it's definitely a great like point coming to that because you have film directors that come in and do the TV and the scheduling. You don't really think that it would be like throw you off track a little bit or something, but like it
Yeah,
really
and
would.
you don't. I mean, I know this was also a frustration for Mary on the Nine, is that it's. And I want to be delicate about this because I don't like to throw anybody under the bus, but the reality is that on television, it's hard sometimes for a director to speak to an actor and say, "This is what I'm looking for," because an actor feels like I own this character.
Right.
I'm going to be here next week, and you're not.
Yeah, it's
It's
true
like,
though.
thank you. So a director can feel very like, I'm not being listened to here. Okay.
Yeah.
So sometimes directors on television kind of become very delicate and very tentative about how they direct actors who are series regulars, and they don't really say anything. And it sort of becomes about just line up the shot, get the day, move it forward, process the day. And
So,
I think actors sometimes in essence kind of, cut their own nose off to spite their face because they don't really allow directors to direct, you know.
it's more like a featured name almost, just like a guest director
Yeah,
type
and
thing.
what happens is the director puts all of the intentionality behind I want to direct actors. I'll make sure the guest star.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, it's like I'm having guested on a lot of shows. It's like, here comes a director. He can't say anything to series regulars. Okay, come on. What do you? I'll let you practice on me.
Yeah. Well, like with TV, it's like what is like a schedule for TV? If you go, do they shoot it way ahead of time? Or are you actually going week to week, so to speak? Ever?
In terms of when the
Outside.
show eventually airs after it's been.
Yeah, you're like when you record, like when you do the filming. How long does it usually take for that episode to make it to air after you guys
It's
film?
it's it's different now with streaming. I mean, streaming,
Okay.
can be months. Network television usually, you were maybe from shooting, you shoot, and then it's got at least a couple of weeks to kind of go through and edit, and then usually it goes to the editor. The editor will do his edit, then the director will look at it and say, hey, I want these notes, and then the showrunner, executive producer will look at it, and maybe there'll be a fourth pass, post production. So at least 2 to 3 weeks before it's finished. I would say generally expect from when you wrap, it's going to be a month before that episode airs.
Hmm.
But like my wife just did one of a 911 Lone Star, I think, and it was 4 months before that
Hmm.
episode came out, which is weird.
And
So
like a TV would typically, do they do a Monday through Friday, or do they do like a Monday through Thursday type
Monday
deal?
through Friday, and every now and again, if they're a pinch, they'll even go Monday through Saturday. You're not going to do that more often than a couple of weeks a year, but and then the hours, like The Good Doctor. I was just on The Good Doctor. They have a much more human schedule than a lot of TV shows. They try and cap it at 10-hour days, but
Hmm.
12 to 14-hour days, I would say, are normative on television. And I mean, it's it. Character actors, hey, we're swimming in gravy as far as I'm concerned. I mean,
Yeah.
I come in and like maybe I'll have 1 or 2 busy days, but generally speaking, I'm not asked to carry an episode. If you're number one, it's a bitch, and
Yeah.
if you're the crew, I mean, hair and makeup, especially, I think the departments that always have to get there first because they're going to make up the actors before everybody else in the crew arrives.
Yeah.
But the crew's there every day, day in, day out. I always thought as an actor that it was my responsibility to make the day move. It's like if you're going to raise an issue, you raise an issue with a solution or shut up. And I've found that over the years, that's one of the things that, like, kind of separates the men from the boys. Actors who say, and it's just a bitch. It's like, hey, you know what? I don't have time for the lament. What solution are you proposing? If it's a good one, maybe we can do it. You got to be able to say, I think the reason that this scene is having a problem is because this guy is actually not really pursuing a strong action. I'm wondering if maybe what he should be doing instead is yada yada, and that would affect the scene this way. Can I try it? If they say no, that's it. If they say, okay, let's try it, and you solved it, great. Now you're keeping the day going. Um, a good team, a good director, a good cast keeps it clicking. I've been on shows where, one actor, it's like, we're tacking an hour and a half onto the day,
Yeah.
because they're going to slow it fucking down.
Yeah, it's quite the pacing I feel like would be a lot different, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, 9 times out of 10, the scene is the scene. It's pretty straightforward, and this doesn't
Yeah.
require a ton of conversation. But there are always scenes that are, that are linchpin scenes, hinge scenes, where it's like, okay, this is the scene that makes or breaks this episode, or really could deleteriously shift our understanding of who this person is, and we need to have a little bit of clarity about it. So you better have thought it through, so that when you come in, you have a really strong foundation on which to stand to say, here's my thought. And to that extent, I sometimes think that's sort of where you get to have a career. If you're known as somebody who can get the day, get people out, do good work, your presentation to the director and to the writers is clear and crisp and specific, and you take your losses. Sometimes it's like, no, you still got to make the scene work. Sometimes you get a direction that's like, I was just on a show, and I liked the director a lot, but he kept saying, I want this matter of fact. It's like, matter of fact is a behavioral manifestation. I need to turn that into a playable action. You don't play matter of fact. You play, I'm going to put a lid on my emotions because otherwise I'm going to lose my shit. You got to be able to translate. I used to have an actor friend who said, you have to be director proof. And it didn't mean that he didn't like or appreciate good directors. He meant that directors speak a different language. Actors speak a language, ideally, that's rooted in intention. What am I going for? What am I going for? What am I trying to achieve? Directors speak in terms of results. This is what I want to see. And you got to be able to translate quickly.
I'm vamped out. Big fan of you is Mike Spencer and True Blood.
You saw a lot of me. You saw a lot of me in the second season. Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Didn't realize when I was signing a nudity waiver that I was signing it for the rest of my fucking life.
You don't think they're going to come into play when you sign them. You just go, well, this is just in case.
No, I went to my wife and said, hey, guess what? I get to sign a nudity waiver. I thought, like, oh, I'll dance around. And then I one scene. It's like, whole fucking season. It's like, one, it's really cold.
Yeah.
Los Angeles at night. We're desert. It's cold. So we're all running around, getting it on. I'd come home in the wee small hours in the morning. My wife would wake up. Say, what did you do last night? It's like, I rubbed chocolate cake on some woman's tits, and then I did dirty dance. Somebody from behind. It's like, she was like, I'd say it was miserable. It was cold.
Yeah.
It wasn't pleasant. And it wasn't. It was like, so, yeah, I have mixed feelings about True Blood.
Those True Blood fans can't be as rabid as those Trekkie fans, can they? I know that there's the True Blood fans are pretty diehard.
Well, I was, I didn't have a particularly big part on True Blood, and after the second season, they didn't use me at all, so it wasn't. I don't really have any kind of.
I remember when True Blood was on, that was the biggest thing going. I even have like the True Blood drink somewhere.
Oh yeah, right. For the first couple of seasons, I think, and I myself, to a certain extent, because they didn't use me after the third season much. I didn't watch as much, but I kind of felt it kind of like they introduced, like one too many, werewolves and
it did fizzle.
Fairies and because to me the whole thing at the beginning was it's like vampirism as a metaphor for homosexuality. It was like interesting. It's like, okay, here we are in a society in which we're trying to say, okay, we're going to mainstream people that we used to treat as outcasts. I thought the metaphor got lost, and they kind of, to me, sort of like, it just became kind of antic for its own sake. I loved the show. I loved that I was only on very briefly, was Alan Ball's show before that about the Undertaker family.
6 Feet Under
Oh,
6 Feet
yeah.
Under.
with
I thought that,
Dexter, pre-Dexter. Yeah,
I thought that was a great show.
I
Maybe
love.
outstayed its welcome by one season, but that was a great show.
I like that. How was working with that crew? Good group of people.
I was when every episode started with a death.
Yeah.
I was the death in one episode, so I didn't work with any of the regular cast.
Okay.
Although Kathy Bates directed me, and that was fun.
Oh, that's cool.
I got hit in the head with a frying pan because I was too dull. My wife was being driven. So she
6
hits.
Feet Under. Yeah, it was a great show. I remember that. That was a really good time.
I have to say, another series that I really liked, that you were on for a few episodes, which was Turn, Washington Spies. You
Yeah,
play Samuel Townsend.
yeah, I like that show too. That show unfortunately was supposed to go an additional season, and they pulled the plug on it prematurely. So although they had written seasons, or at least they had sketched out seasons 4 and 5, they effectively were told to condense into one season, season 4. So they condensed me right out of the show. So yeah, that's another show I kind of was like, all right, bye.
So, I mean, one thing I wanted to ask is, how does it feel? Uh, you like doing like historical pieces, and that kind of stuff, like going into the history and doing research like that, and kind of like, you know,
I mean,
immersing yourself in stuff like that.
no, again, you don't need to. I mean, in my opinion, I mean, when I was younger, I used to kind of feel like, Uta Hagen famously wrote a book called Respect for Acting, and a number of other people, I think, although Uta Hagen kind of went on to say, now that years have passed, I kind of want to revisit that book. I think a lot of people were of the mind, I certainly was when I was younger, that it was important to kind of like do this, very intense biography and what did I have for breakfast and blah, 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 blah. As I've gotten older, feel like 95% of that is not germane. When I'm talking to you right now, I'm not fucking thinking about what I had for breakfast. I'm not thinking about the historical reality of I'm just
Yeah.
in the moment.
Yeah.
To me, acting is about opening yourself up to the moment, really listening, and having a strong sense of intention. And generally speaking, the fact that I'm wearing a powdered wig doesn't have anything to do with it. That character, for instance, I needed to have some sense of what the historical circumstances were in a war.
Yeah.
One has to be extremely careful and very delicate. I'm trying to keep, in a middle ground. I don't want to alienate anybody. I don't want to piss anybody off. But my bottom line reason for doing that is because I have a strong philosophical belief that violence is never the answer. That is not. I don't need to know everything about the Revolutionary War to understand what it means to have that belief system. 9 out of 10 times, your action is rooted in something that is deeply felt, that you can find in yourself, and is not conditioned on the circumstance. You need to know enough about the circumstance to understand what to find within yourself, but you don't need to know everything. I mean, because that puts you in a position of, why don't you read one more book about the Revolutionary War? You could act it even better if you read one more book about the Revolutionary War. You know what? You'd even be better if you read 3 more books about the Revolutionary War. It's like, I could stuff my head with the Revolutionary War isn't going to help me act that scene one whit better.
Yeah. Well, John, this was a lot of fun. Alex, do you have anything else you want to ask up?
Oh, just I just wanted to say it has been a pleasure. I am so happy
Absolutely.
that you took the time to talk to us about
Anytime.
your career and the stuff that you love, and that's what we love. We love talking about and finding more about the people we interview, stuff that we didn't know about, and we're happy that you took the time to let us know more about you.
Yes, sir.
Anytime.
Yes,
My
sir.
pleasure. My
We,
pleasure.
we, we do have our big closer question, of
Oh,
course,
absolutely.
which is, we get a lot of filmmakers, actors, musicians, comedians, authors that listen to and watch the show. Do you have any advice for a creative that finds themselves in a slump? That, some words of advice or anything you might have used or passed off to somebody that could help them kind of get through it?
Well, I mean, a slump is interesting. I mean, I think that's there. We impose that on ourselves. What a slump
Yeah.
means. I mean, I think as much as anything for me, and this is just a function of age, I certainly have gone through those little periods where it's like, I'm not getting cast, I'm not working. I think it's really important that you recognize that 90% of your life is lived in relationship to the people you love. And
Mm.
that's important. important. You know, the work is the work. It comes and goes. It's got its ups and downs. The way in the end you're going to feel on your deathbed, you're going to be happy if you feel you're surrounded by friends and loved ones. And I think in the end, it's like I would just say, take everything that is making you feel crazy about the work and put it in perspective. The work is not your life. Your life is your life. What do you do in your community? Go out and see a pal. You know, have sex with your wife. You know, take your kid on the Ferris wheel.
That was great advice. I like that a lot. You know, it's huge. You know, that's big. Family. You know, it is that thing the thing you said about, you know, worry about your life and not the things. You know, the work isn't your life.
There's a book I love. Well, there are two books that come to mind. One is Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahn. I can never pronounce his name. He's an Israeli writer. But a less abstruse and easier to access book that deals with the same thing is called Stumbling on Happiness. And they're both about the ways in which our little brain fuck gets in the way of making decisions about about how we behave in the world that will make us happy. You know, the power of now is another interesting book that I think kind of addresses this. I really think that so much of our journey is about, like, you know, look, you have choices to make that are fundamentally rooted in how you can be happy in this world. And you know, it's the work is one aspect of who you are, and the least thing you can probably control. What you can control are the relationships you choose to make central to your life every day. The focus that goes into those relationships will give you happiness. And from happiness comes the work, I honestly think.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that completely. You know what I mean? Well, John, this was fantastic, man. This was a great time. Thank you again.
My pleasure, anytime.
We'll have you on again. And it was Trek Talks. Is there like a website or a Facebook page that people?
Yeah, go to trekgeeks.net, and they kind of are our podcast parent. Ditto roddenberry.com. They kind of co-produce the event every year. The wonderful John Champion, the wonderful Bill Smith, the wonderful Dan Davidson. It's a team of 10. I won't list everybody, but David Livingston, the guy who's directed more Star Trek episodes than anybody in Star Trek history, is a partner, also a member of the board of the Hollywood Food Coalition. He's really instrumental. Yeah, January, usually I won't give you a date, but it'll be the first weekend or two.
That's definitely cool. It's a cool experience, and you guys are doing a good thing, you know. So definitely, people get out there and support that. We need more good stuff.
Yeah, and you can check out Hollywood Food Coalition at hofoco, hofoco.org if you're interested in supporting the work we do in Los Angeles. We help distribute food that we rescue, over 2 million pounds of food a year, to about 130 not-for-profits to help buttress and augment their meal programs.
Very good, man. Kudos, dude. Big props. Much respect and love for that. I love seeing a dude making a change. You know what I mean? That's a beautiful, getting out there and actually doing it. You know, a lot of people like to talk, like myself, I like to talk about it, but we got someone over here that actually likes to do it, and the greater good. You know what I mean? Making the world a better place.
I won't go on and on, but I'm a great believer that one of the things that, you know, to answer your question, that should animate us if we're feeling stuck in our work, is think about what you can do to volunteer in your community that will make you happy. And it's like figuring out your volunteeristic bliss. Maybe that's tutoring a kid in school. Maybe it's volunteering in a library. For me, it was kind of getting involved in an organization that works with people who are hungry. Everybody has a different, like, you know, animating spirit. You know, clean up the park. But there's something that's going to make you feel like you've given back. And that's what's daunting in our work, is we feel like we're not giving back. You know, the work is stuck. I'm not giving back. Give back in a different direction.
Yeah. You know what I mean? You know, you're depressed, feeling empty. You know, you're looking for a way to pick it up. Nothing helping somebody out, put a smile on somebody else's face is the quickest way to get one.
Principle of acting. Acting is doing. You know, I used to teach, and it's like the thing that makes you an actor in the end is you do. You're always doing something. And in your career, when you feel like you're not doing anything, find a way to do. You know, it doesn't have to be acting. You gotta be doing shit. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
That's it. I like it.
All right, ciao, cool. Bella. Ciao, Bella. Have a lovely Sunday.
You too. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Pleasure to meet you both. You got that little tiny patch of wall. I want that covered the next time I see you.
Right up here. I'm gonna cover with my hand.
Okay. All right.
All right, John. Have a good evening over there. We'll talk to you soon.
Much obliged, guys.
And that was the great John Billingsley. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A great sit down. You know, big fan of the dude leading in, and we were not disappointed. Great guy, greater than I even could imagine. Great guy as a person, doing great things is a good way to put it. And we appreciate that, because me and Alex sometimes take ourselves to, you know, maybe be semi-great guys doing semi-great things. And it's good to have good people on the show. And I guess we're semi-great doing great things if, you know, we're pushing this. And Trek talks and stuff like that we'll be pushing on our show, because stuff like that's big, man. It's great giving back. If people want the aliens to come back, you got to make humanity worth wanting to be friends with, hence taking care of each other, and the whole vibe for you Treks out there listening, like Alex.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things about you have so many people who are huge fans of Star Trek, of Gene Roddenberry's vision, but I mean, it's always easier to agree or watch something, but it's always harder to actually do. And and the thing is, I mean, he's doing it, and he's trying his best in his community to try to hopefully start up Gene Roddenberry's vision. To I mean, the whole purpose of Star Trek is an ideal version of the future where we put all of our animosity aside for whatever trivial reasons and work together for the common good to go out to explore, to go on a trek, to learn about.
Go on a trek.
Yeah.
Star Trek Enterprise on
Yes.
Star Trek.
But
I got you.
But yeah, I mean, it was great talking to John. He's an extremely talented actor. I've been a fan of his for a long time, and it was an honor to have him on the show. And as we said on the show, that getting to talk about his love for reading, his charity work. I mean, those kind of stories. I mean, I knew a little bit about it, but I didn't know that much. And we ended up talking a lot about that, which is what I love about our show, is going to find out the deeper side, the side that they don't talk about on podcasts, because everyone wants to hear about, of course, the movie stories, the TV stories, which we all love, and that's one things we love about a podcast.
Yeah.
But the human stories is what I think makes our podcast even better. That's my personal opinion.
No, I'm with you, man. I forgot to ask about 2012. Woo! Next time. We'll definitely have him on again. He was a good dude. And heck yeah. If y'all like that episode, go check out more episodes wherever you listen or watch the BoomBastiCAST. If you like to, you're looking to support your BBC boys over here in the financially department, we got our Patreon page at BoomBastic with two O's at streaming, BoomBastic streaming at patreon.com. We've got different tiers of perks of cool things for people who's looking to support. You don't have to, but if you can and you wanna, it's there. I mean, and you can be a great person doing great things too if you're going to support your boys at the Boo. So, with that being said, we'll catch all y'all on the next episode of that BoomBastiCAST. Peace.